Hello everyone and welcome to the Nuggy Guys podcast. I'm your host Sid and I'm joined by Doug and Pat.
We are on the 6th episode and I am presenting today on the Shroud of Turin. And just a quick background here, the Shroud of Turin is a piece of fabric 14 feet 3 inches by 3 feet 7 inches that has the impression of a man crucified in Roman style on it. It's supposed to be the burial cloth of Jesus, the cloth that Nicodemus wrapped around Jesus' body. It has been analyzed extensively, and since 1980, over 170 peer-reviewed academic papers have examined it, and spoiler alert, they reached no decision of its authenticity. A quick history on the cloth itself. It was possibly owned by the Byzantine emperors before the fall of Constantinople, before being transferred to Paris, but that could have been a different icon. It's a little bit confusing about, is that the actual piece of fabric we have today? Was that a different piece of fabric? We don't know. Anyway, we do know it verifiably surfaced about 90 miles away from Paris around 1355, and it has been with us ever since. In 1389, it was denounced as a fraud by the local bishop. In 1532, it was damaged by fire and water after somebody spilled molten silver on it. I don't know how you do that, but anyway, it burned some holes through it, and those were patched by some local nuns. In 1578, it was sent by the Duke of Savoy to Turin, where it got its name. It's a town of Italy. The patches on it were repatched in 1694, and again in 1868. And in 1983, it was gifted to the Holy See, or the Catholic Church. In 1997, it survived a possible arson attack on the church where it was stored. When firefighters broke into the case it was stored in and removed it quickly. And in 2002, the Holy See had it restored, and the backing and the patches were removed so that you could see the reverse side of the cloth. So before we get into any evidence about its authenticity or anything, do you have any questions on it real quick?
So this is one giant piece of cloth that they theorized was just wrapped around Jesus' body, or was it like a whole bunch of windings, like supposedly Lazarus? I mean, it's always portrayed in the action Bible storybooks or whatever, where they wrap him up in a 100-foot long cloth. Or how is this?
Yeah, this is just one piece of cloth, and there is also a napkin that was supposed to be put around his face. I'm not going to talk about that today. It's a completely different subject, or at least for the most part. You can bring it up if you want anything to say about it. But no, the Jews did not mummify people with the long strips of cloth. They wrapped them up with one piece, supposedly. Now, I'm not a Jewish burial scholar, but that's what the Jewish burial scholars say.
Okay. So what, they would have just laid the person in the middle of this cloth and then folded it around their back, or not?
Yes, basically. That's basically what we think happened. And about the image of the person on it, just as a little context for how controversial and sort of just messed up the data is on this thing, it's very hard to even tell how tall this guy was. There's some sources say he's 5'7", some say he's 5'9", some say he's somewhere between 5'9" and 6 foot. It just shows that I don't know who they hired as academics to research this stuff, but they are not agreeing on even how tall the image is.
Okay, and to make sure we talk about this image, there's an impression, there is can you explain what this image is, how you can see it?
Okay, so this image is literally just discoloration of the cloth. It's not an ink, it's not a paint, it's nothing of that type. It's just the cloth is discolored in some way, and the discoloration, it's only 200 nanometers thick, so it's on the very top layer of fibers of the cloth, so it's basically not there. And it's theorized the only way that you could make something of this type, because they have tried since the 80s, or since the 60s roughly, every different method you could think of to imprint an image like this on a piece of cloth. It's theorized that basically the only way you can do it is basically turn the sheet into film by having an overpowering blast of light or X-ray radiation or something to actually make a negative on the sheet.
Okay, so almost like shadows being burned into concrete by an atomic weapon or something.
Yeah, sort of that idea.
Interesting. And is this visible to the naked eye? I mean, we have a photo here. I believe Patrick's going to put a link in the description of the video to where you can actually find photos of this. But is this visible to the naked eye?
Yes, this is visible to the naked eye, but if you could see the actual shroud, it's not nearly as visible unless you change some of like the coloration. Like you take your phone and switch, like inverse the coloration on your phone. Like they have some setting for blind people or something weird. I don't really understand it. And you can see it very much better than you can with your naked eye.
Okay. And am I correct that once you get too close to it, the image disappears? Do you have any research? I've heard that when anything closer than 8 feet, and you actually can't see it because it's that faint or something.
Well, you're looking at a 14-foot piece of cloth to start with, right? And so the impression of the person is at least 5'7" or whatever. So yes, once you get close enough, it's very hard to make out the details. It's more when you're farther back that you can see the entire image and be like, oh, I see what that's. It's like if you look at anything else too close.
Okay, interesting. So pretty much the people who believe in this as being the actual cloth Jesus was wrapped in were saying that when he was resurrected, he was glowing, radiating light, as is talked in, like, say, on the Mount of Transfiguration and that kind of thing. Like, he's emitting all this light or whatever energy. Some of it's obviously light because people can see it.
Yes, that's
and essentially just... Well, it didn't really sear the cloth, right? It's not like it's a heat thing.
It's not a burn.
It's not a burn. It's some kind of an energy deformation of the cloth or something.
Yeah, there's theories you could do with chemicals, but no one's been able to do it yet. Like,
right. Well, and then good luck, like, misting a person with chemicals and then carefully imprinting that on them.
Yeah.
Why don't you go through some of the yeses and nos about why this may or may not be the real cloth? What do the skeptics say? What do the believers say?
Okay, so one of the main things the skeptics say, or the main thing the skeptics say, is that in 1988, the Catholic Church sent out, I believe it was postage stamp size samples of the fabric from around the edges of the cloth, interestingly enough, to get carbon-14 tested, because they wanted to see what this dates to. They sent 3 different labs, and their conclusions were that it dated from 1260 to 1390. Like, basically, it was made in the Middle Ages, and it was a medieval forgery. However, since then, when we actually gained access in the late 2000s to the actual numbers that these guys ran, it's theorized that the chances of those people, like the chance of the cloth that they used being the same piece of cloth, because their numbers were so skewed, was like 1%. Their numbers were wildly different, supposedly. I don't really understand the breakdown of carbon-14 dating numbers.
Am I correct that the carbon-14 people who dated it also were skeptics of this? I mean, you have to be very careful with that, especially when you look at geology from a creation-based standpoint. They do whatever radiocarbon dating or whatever dating they do on rocks and things. It involves wild guesstimations, and they often date rocks simply based on the rock layer they were found in, despite the fact that you can find fossils of trees growing through multiple rock layers, which they would date to be thousands of years different in age. So a lot of that dating, I'm not saying carbon dating necessarily, but there's a lot of dating methods that are wildly unscientific because they are used as a way to support a evolutionary standpoint.
Yeah, the rock dating is a little bit different, but yes, carbon-14 dating, in my opinion, is rather sus all around because things get dated wildly differently depending who tests them and stuff. But even so, I'm just going to say that's like the main evidence against it, that it was tested, and they say it comes from the 12 to 1300s, basically. And now, since then, it's also been argued that the methods they used were faulty, like some of their instruments were maybe contaminated or something. I do not understand carbon-14 dating well enough to say, yes, the study they did was definitely real, or no, it definitely was biased. Now, on the evidence for the shroud being authentic, well, first off, the main evidence is that we can't replicate this, at least not yet. No one has found a way to replicate this, and they've been trying for quite a long time. I would say that, in my mind, is the greatest evidence. There's also evidence, so like the blood that is on the shroud is supposedly type AB. Now, some journals said that. I couldn't find that everywhere. I'm not exactly sure if that's true, but it is apparently type AB, just in case someone wants to know that.
One of the rarest blood types.
I don't actually know that.
Yeah, it's the rarest, and it's the type that is compatible with all other types.
Is it?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure on that.
Because I thought it was type OA or something that's compatible with all other types.
Well, or if you have that type of blood, you can get transfusions from all other types. I think is how it works.
They can receive red blood cells from all blood types.
Yeah.
And only 0.6% of the U.S. population has type AB.
Okay, yeah, it's not.
And yeah, it's a universal plasma donor. So I would have, if I was going to do a deep study on it, I would have some serious questions about how you can accurately typify blood that is potentially 2,000 years old. I'm not arguing it can't be done. I would have thought it would have, decomposed or whatever. Since then, you hear genetic dating or not genetic dating, genetic whatever research of these frozen skeletons or frozen people and things, and that's maybe more accurate because they're frozen. But anything that's been exposed to light and air and things for thousands of years is generally considered not able to be dated or researched very well because of the decomposition.
Yeah,
the dating is maybe more possible, but
yeah, I don't know about that. I have one more thing on the blood though. It does contain high levels of creatinine. I believe I'm saying that right. I have no clue. And ferritin, which could come from, which you can get from being tortured. If you're really stressed, it'll spike your levels of that all of a sudden. That's not obviously conclusive evidence in any way, but it's just a fascinating fact. And about DNA analysis, they did DNA analysis on the shroud for different threads from it, and they found all kinds of people's DNA and all kinds of animal DNA. This thing's been handled a lot. Let's just put it that way. It's been all over the world. So that's inconclusive completely.
And then you made the point that you think it would be deteriorated too much to do an accurate dating experiment, right?
Well, to do an accurate blood analysis.
Or blood analysis.
Dating, no, I think they have methods that they could probably do. But I'm very questioning of any dating done by a non-creation-based platform because there's just so much, they just love dating these rocks back millions or billions of years, and I'm like, no, that's not how that works. And therefore I distrust any dating that they do.
Right. Which this cloth has been pretty well preserved, right? Because, well, here's a little thought experiment of sorts. Peter goes into the tomb and sees the grave clothes laying there.
Peter and John, yeah.
Right. From there, where do they go? Who do you think grabbed them, if someone did? And then from there,
the Greek Orthodox tradition is Thaddeus takes them to Syria. I forget which town it is in Syria.
Okay.
And then they're actually hidden in a wall of the city, eventually used to repel some Muslim invaders before being sent off to France. Before being sent to Constantinople, and then when Constantinople's about to fall, they get sent to Paris. That's the Greek Orthodox tradition on this.
Okay.
It is very hard, though, to verify any of that taking to Syria thing, because it could have been a different object or cloth. It's very, very vague on what was there, what was stored there. I really can't verify that. I have one more thing on the dating of this shroud. So, in 2022, there was a study done on a single thread from the shroud, which used wide-angle X-ray scattering wax, and that suggested that the fabric of the shroud was from the 1st century. However, that was contingent on you knowing the temperatures and also the humidities across the period. You have to know the average of that, which I think is sort of sus that you could know that. They used reasonable numbers, but we don't know where this was stored this whole time. We can't tell you it was stored at this temperature and this humidity.
And as another note, kind of on a different light on this whole thing, crucifixion, the way the Romans did it, as I understand, was not something that has happened throughout all ages. There was maybe 500 years that it was done or something. I don't believe crucifixion was practiced the way the Romans did in the Middle Ages. Can either of you guys confirm or deny that?
Yes, crucifixion was pretty much an exclusively Roman punishment. Every now and then there'd be a one-off crucifixion in some other random culture. You hear of some type of crucifixion, but it's nothing like the Romans did.
Sure. Supposedly it's been used as recently as the 21st century. But I've heard some research, and I don't know what all it was, that specific type of crucifixion was fairly limited in use to the Romans during the era that Jesus was crucified. And this body clearly shows signs of crucifixion, right?
Yes, you can see it also shows signs of being whipped, and then it does show, I can't really say that I can see this, and I'm not exactly sure how they know this, but they claim they can see where the spear went into his side. I can't personally say, I can easily see that from these photographs. But That's what scholars say. So I don't know. Do you believe the scholars or not? That's sort of the question here. I would say my first takeaway is that it's definitely an imprint of a crucified man, and he had to be from a long time ago. And it's also, there's some like pollen evidence that it was from the Mediterranean. Now, from the Mediterranean region, now pollen can be carried on the wind. You can't exactly pin that down. It's a little hard to do, but there is evidence of that, I would say, at least. And then you have to decide which crucified person is this.
Yeah, there's a lot of people crucified, but definitely to me the biggest thing is how do you burn an imprint into a cloth that lasts for, I mean, it's been around for about 1,000 years now at least, right?
Yeah.
700 years. How do you do this, whatever, burn this imprint into a cloth for that long, that it lasts and doesn't get destroyed and all that?
Yeah, that's definitely one of the biggest questions about this. Doug, do you have a lot of thoughts on... I don't know, I'd sort of like to go into, like, what's the theological implications of this? Or are there any?
Well, so from a Christian perspective, to think that Jesus was shining and glowing when he rose, I believe that's a valid thought. He's often portrayed as glowing during any major event.
Yeah, and
there's a few very distinctive times that he was portrayed as glowing.
Yeah, the theory is sort of, though, that like it was the moment of his resurrection that left this imprint.
I mean,
like when he transformed,
just zapped that thing.
Where were we at though? Oh, we were
talking
talking
about the blood on it.
Theological. Well, I can't. Like I said, basically what I can say about the blood on it.
Okay, but there is markings from the blood.
Is there no way they could DNA test like the blood?
Well, it's not actual blood on the fabric, is it?
It's not the residue of the blood.
Where is there actual?
No, there
One
was,
dude
because
claimed-
how did they know the type? You wouldn't know the type without having blood.
Forget I said that.
Here's what I'm gonna say about the blood. One guy claimed he didn't believe it was blood at all. He thought it was literally iron oxide. He thought it was rust. So the blood is decently decomposed.
Sure. There's iron.
But the blood is not what is causing this image.
No, the image you see that's like burnt, for lack of a better
Right.
term to use, like flashed onto the shroud, is not caused by the blood.
Right.
It's just discoloration. Now, there is blood on the shroud, and there's like pools of where blood had been, basically. Like residue remains. I don't know how complete that blood is. Now, they claim they could blood test it. Even though one researcher claimed that he just thought it was straight up iron oxide. He thought it was rust. So, I really don't understand how people can study the same thing and arrive at so entirely different conclusions.
Why is it, like, what's the ongoing research right now? I feel like there should be a way to, more scientifically now in 2025, prove this, or is it just not open to being researched?
Well, that last study I cited was in 2022, but I don't know there's any ongoing investigations. I didn't come across any.
It's still held by the Catholic Church?
Yeah, you can go see it. I was on their website. There's actually a
You can see it in
website
person?
for the Church of the Shroud of Turin. Or maybe it's just for the Shroud of Turin. Anyway, yeah, you can go look at it. It's in a glass case, or like it's behind glass, decently far back. And you go look at it if you want to. It's in Italy.
Fascinating.
And interestingly enough, I don't know if I said this, but it stayed in Turin. Like, even though it was given to the Holy See, it was not moved by them.
Sure.
Or like it's still displayed there.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. It's just a wild. If it is true, it's just a wild artifact. And if it's a false whatever, first off, I have some serious questions about why would the medieval people have tried to create something like this. I mean, it's not even a recreation necessarily. How did they know about it, right? And then how did they go about creating such a good, create such a good fake that nobody's been able to prove whether or not it's a fake. That's a lot of dedication to it.
Yeah, some people think they made it just like as an icon. I mean, obviously it was valuable. In fact, one lady who sold it got excommunicated because you're not supposed to be selling icons. I could not figure out how much money she got for it. That would have been interesting. But that was also in like the 1300s that she did that. And the other thing is you mentioned, or you didn't actually mention, sorry. The other thing is, if you look at the face shown on the shroud, it looks very much like medieval depictions of Jesus in general, and actually sort of like even starting from maybe the 1st century depictions of Jesus. And some people will see that and say, oh, that definitely means that it's just a copy off of what people thought Jesus was like, so they made this forgery because it'd be valuable, and they just thought, it'd be something to venerate. Now, You could also take the completely opposite view and say those pictures were divinely inspired. This was the actual face of Jesus. Of course they drew it like it was. You can arrive at two completely different spots from the same point.
So I think you can take that either way, but I think the people who knew Jesus, surely there's people who saw Jesus and painted him back then. And maybe there was an ongoing, photos handed or paintings handed down of Jesus that inspired other paintings, and it kind of rolled along. I don't know. But I don't think the fact that it looks like a common depiction of Jesus rules it out.
Yeah, I think that theory that it somehow rules it out just because it looks like a common depiction of Jesus is pretty stupid.
There's a lot of other interesting artifacts, like, that we're not going to get into, like the Dead Sea Scrolls and things that have survived all these tests of time that prove Christianity. It's really interesting. I mean, we're still missing the Ark of the Covenant. That doesn't necessarily prove Christianity, but it does prove the validity of the Old Testament. But it's still hidden. Somebody probably knows where it is.
Well, actually, I almost did an episode on that because, very interestingly enough, the Copper Scroll and the Dead Sea Scrolls is basically just a treasure map leading to supposedly where the temple riches were buried. Could possibly include the Ark of the Covenant, but that would be another episode. Hey, if you want another episode on that, leave a comment.
Yeah, feel free to let ideas of what you want to hear about. Yeah, we love nerding out about some of this stuff. It's a good time. So feel free, if you want us to do a little bit of research and present, just let us know.
Now, on the theological side, I sort of like to think that this is something God gives us just so that we argue about whether or not Jesus was real. Because people would not be spending years, there's an institute dedicated to studying this thing. We would not be talking about it today if something like this didn't exist. And also, we probably wouldn't be talking about it if it wasn't controversial on whether or not it was real.
Right. And the very fact that people argue about it and try to disprove it, kind of like them trying to disprove creation, means that there's enough evidence that it scares them and they can't comfortably believe that there is no God and that there is no mighty creator. Therefore, they spend all their energy trying to disprove it because they feel uncomfortable. You know what Darwin said, if what I'm teaching is false, I mean, this is not a direct quote, but if what I'm teaching is false, it should perish or it'll get thrown aside.
And Darwin is sort of a different topic because he has basically been kicked out nowadays.
Yeah.
On other counterfeits and why some people think it's counterfeit, there was a counterfeit shroud that was made sometime, I believe it was in the Middle Ages, of a supposed saint that they eventually discovered the counterfeit. I don't really have the backstory on all that. And so, there is some precedent for trying things like this. Then again, we also found a burial shroud in Masada, an Israeli city that was completely razed by the Romans, and they all committed suicide. Anyway, interesting story there. And that was part of the evidence that they used for that wax test that I talked about before, so that they could know, okay, we know when this one dates to, so we can sort of infer when the Shroud of Turin might date to. So, different shrouds, some of them real, some of them fake.
Do these shrouds have imprints of people on them, though, or not? They're just a burial cloth.
No, not the one in Masada, as far as I'm aware.
Who even thought of a shroud? I mean, it's what's a shroud? I don't know.
It was just Jewish tradition, I think.
Well, it's like a body bag nowadays.
Yeah.
So you have this body bag. Okay, what does that prove? But now we've got one with a person seared into it, like their image.
Yeah.
But there appears to only be one, right?
As far as I know, there is only one like this. There's definitely only one that has this type of image in that we cannot recreate. Do you have any thoughts, Doug?
I think Douglas's deep thoughts. He's like Deep Thought, the computer who found the answer to the universe in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yes.
It thought for millions of years. When it was finally ready to give its answer, it said 42. They're like, what? And he's like, the question is not what is the answer to life, the universe, and everything, but what is the question?
That's right. They defined the question to the answer 42 so that they would understand life, the universe.
He said there's no way he could calculate it. He took millions and millions of years to calculate this answer. And he said, look, I got you the answer after all this calculation, but I can't get you the question. To do that, we're going to have to make a different computer, and I will help you build it.
Wow.
That
was definitely part of this conversation.
Are you keeping this in?
I almost will because it's funny.
I mean, they're great books. Really, those books are amazing. Thanks to Douglas Adams for...
Unfortunately, not our Douglas.
Right. Not our Douglas, but maybe better, maybe not better. Douglas has many years to prove. But he wrote a really mind-warping set of books. They're very good at teaching you to not just believe everything you know. Because every time you think you know where they're going, he twists the plot up on you. And it's fascinating. I think it's really good. Teaches you a lot. Teaches you to think critically and teaches you to, use your brain instead of everybody else's supposed
100%.
knowledge.
And fast facts, it's actually what Elon Musk bases his philosophy also off of, is the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Which philosophy? Like
his philosophy of life.
Life in general?
Life in
the
general.
universe and everything?
But anyway, that's a different subject.
Where's my Babel fish?
You don't get one.
Bummer.
Do you have any thoughts, Sid or Doug, on, like, what's the implications of this? Like, if this is real, what else do we gotta believe? And if this is fake, maybe what else should we throw out?
I don't really think it changes our Christianity. True Christians, I don't think it changes a lot for. Besides that, it maybe gives you a true visualization of what we believe Jesus looked like, which is good. It's good to see it and think, that really, I believe that to be my Lord and Savior, or if you don't believe in it, no. But, kind of, it embodies him in a way that you can without some help, a visual effect or something.
Yeah, I think even if this is soundly disproved, there's still more than enough historical evidence and evidence in the Gospels to prove the life and death and resurrection of Jesus. I don't think this is at all a key piece of evidence for proving any of that.
Yeah, I would say, I would sort of push back on that. I think this is the only evidence we could say of Jesus' resurrection. We have plenty of evidence from other sources.
Physical evidence.
Yeah, any physical evidence.
We have hundreds and hundreds of testimonies, right?
Yes, we do have that. I'm saying
we don't have a lot of physical evidence of any of his life.
Yeah, not a whole lot. But I'm saying, like, outside of the Bible, people will be like, outside of the Bible, what evidence do you got that Jesus existed? Well, there's plenty. Yeah, there's a lot of actual writings. We can easily tell that there was a guy named Jesus, or some variant of that name, who was executed by the Romans by crucifixion around the year 0. Give or take 100 years, right?
I thought it's within 50 or something.
Well, it technically is in 33 or whatever. But also we moved the time point of history. Anyway, we've screwed that up a little bit. But whatever. Give or take 100 years, we know that somewhere around 0, the Romans crucified a guy named Jesus from other texts that are outside the Bible.
And he was not just a guy. I mean, they crucified thousands of people, right? But he was a very prominent guy. I mean,
he was worth
Islamic
mentioning in their histories. Like, they don't mention many other people who got crucified.
Right. The Islamic people believe in him, right?
Yeah, they believe that he was a great prophet. Well, not the right prophet, sorry, but he was a prophet. Right. And
so there's a lot of people who believe it. There's just some who believe he came back.
Yeah, and also, you could say this disproves the two other major religions competing with Christianity. You could say the fact that he resurrected, that this image has left us, disproves Islam, because they don't believe that he resurrected, because he was just a prophet. He was not God. And you could say the fact that he existed at all disproves Judaism, because they do not believe. Well, okay, also the fact that he resurrected disproves Judaism, because they don't believe he was the Son of God either.
Yeah, whether or not this changes your view on it, it's a really great... It's a good thing to think about. It kind of gets you out of your rut of who you think Jesus is, and it kind of puts him into a human perspective.
Yeah, and fascinatingly enough, supposedly C.S. Lewis had this picture over his bed so that he could see it every day when he woke up and went to sleep, because he just wanted to see what Jesus looked like every day, which is actually a sort of cool idea. Like, his face is decently pleasant to look at, even though he's not smiling.
It's a resting face. It's a peaceful face, kind of. You know who it does look like? It looks like the way they portrayed Thorin in Lord of the Rings when he was buried.
It actually does to some degree.
When you first said the Shroud, what's it called?
Turin.
Turin. I about told you not to be confused with anything to do with Durin in Lord of the Rings.
Definitely different person.
Distinctly different.
Okay, the other thing, while we're looking at this picture a little bit, So you see how this one arm looks slightly longer? That is also supposedly an evidence that this is fake. They say this dude's arm is contorted. Like this arm right here, which would be his right arm.
Which one is
Well,
longer?
actually, I'm not sure. Why does it look like the left arm's longer
This
than this
one?
one?
Or you don't remember which arm they say is long?
I don't remember which arm they say is longer, but this one, right? Because it's the one that's crossed. Or it's underneath one of his crossed hands. So they say that's too long. Like, they went out and dislocated someone's bone or his arm and, like, made him do that or something.
Yeah, but isn't it possible his arm was dislocated?
Well, it's very possible. It's also possible that...
Crucifixion?
I mean, if this is just you being wrapped up in a towel, in a sheet, like, what parts of your arm is it touching? What parts is it making look longer? What parts is it making look shorter? I don't think that's a very valid criticism of this shroud at all. There's definitely some better criticisms you could have.
Right, like how did these people build this so very carefully? And then whoops, the only thing they got wrong was his one arm was a little bit longer.
Yeah, and there's also the theory that the samples that they carbon dated were actually, well, they were taken from the edge of the claw, so they probably had higher carbon content. I don't know how you would know that that's likely, but supposedly that's true. Also, they may have been some of those patches that were put in and removed, and it's a little bit sketchy on maybe what parts were patched. Though we do know when they spilled that molten silver on it, it did not damage the image much like it was elsewhere on the cloth. Also, like, little side note, I would love to know who was running around with molten silver. Just happened to spill it on, like, the holiest relic.
So I actually heard the story of this, and I have no way of verifying this, but the story I heard was it was stored in a silver cask that melted from the heat, which seems relatively plausible. But the heat of the fire. There's a fire in the building that this is in.
Okay.
And the silver cask that it is stored in starts to melt. So, that's a possibility.
The fact that, the top of the cask or whatever could get hot enough to melt and drip on it, but not burn it inside. Now, if it was airtight, okay, but then if there's silver dripping, that might, I don't know.
Who knows?
Well, it's just interesting because you would think it would have combusted.
Yeah.
Supposedly silver melts at roughly 1,763 degrees Fahrenheit. 961 for all you commies out there.
Yeah, that's why it says C, communism.
Definitely.
Facts.
But I'm just saying, like, that was some insane temperatures,
Yeah.
if that's true. Like,
Yeah,
that's pretty wild.
Either way, it doesn't really change.
a while before that.
Yeah, valid. Doesn't really change a lot of the story surrounding it, I wouldn't say.
The other thing I find fascinating is that we bothered preserving it this long, and it survived multiple fires and whatnot. I find that very interesting.
Yeah, if we could preserve this long and Jesus did not rise, how can they have preserved his body that long?
That's true.
Like, if he didn't rise, like, he was so popular back then based on all the writings ever. It doesn't matter if you're Islamic or Judaic or whatever. They would still have believed that there was a false prophet named Jesus, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, they razed the site of his tomb, supposedly. Like, they destroyed the church that was at the site of his tomb during the destruction of Jerusalem. Because, well, and then they went and erected a temple to the pagan deities, basically, there.
Like, if there had been a body, why wouldn't it have been preserved? Unless the disciples wanted to make it go bye-bye.
Well, that was obviously what the Pharisees said.
But you still think they would have hidden it?
I think they would have hidden it. Also, I don't see why the Romans would have destroyed it when they went and destroyed the church, if they could have found it. It's obviously a lot of conjecture right there, but...
Sure. What imaging have they done? Is there any other way? Like, apparently this fabric is just slightly discolored. Is there any other ways to image it? Well, and they obviously did X-ray, you said, right?
That was sort of like X-ray analysis, because it's like scattering electrical waves. There's many things about dating things I do not understand.
Well,
But-
I'm talking about imaging. Like,
Okay, so here's... Too bad our audience can't see it, but, like, here's an image they made. I can't remember what they used to make this image. That sort of, like, it sort of enhances it. They've done lots of different imaging on it. You can make it sort of 3D, depending what imaging type you do on it. Now, you can sort of do that with any image. That's not, like, proof that it's extra strange in any way. Or it could be proof in some way. There's also a manuscript that depicts a shroud like this and how it's being wrapped around Jesus' body. And that, I believe that was from Central Europe, though, in the early 1000s. Want to talk about any other theories about this? See, it'd be sort of fun to dive into the Ark of the Covenant sometimes. You know, like the Ethiopians claim they got it.
The Ark of the Covenant's a fun one because you touch it and you go puff bang.
That's right.
I mean, we still believe that would probably happen.
Yes.
Yeah, just the fact that they can't disprove it. If it's a fake, you should easily be able to disprove it, right?
Well, the main thing pretty much every researcher says is if this isn't real, this is the most elaborate medieval forgery that ever happened. So, either way, everybody's interested in it.
The good old alchemists were trying to make gold back then, not... Okay, maybe that's a slightly different era.
Alchemists trying to get rid of a body accidentally makes this.
Accidentally electrify it and burn an image of it into the cloth. How about that?
Yeah, I don't really see that as convincing, but
alchemy was wild, brother.
There are some options on maybe some wild scenarios in which ways it could be made.
I mean, I'm really down to try to recreate it, just to prove that you can't. Or prove what it would take, to recreate it.
And pretty well all throughout the 60s to the 80s, before they had decent dating methods, or before they were allowed to use them on the Shroud, there were researchers all over the place trying to create different ways of doing this, wrapping sheets around people and pouring different chemicals on them. Not waterboarding.
It's not waterboarding if you use diesel, brother.
Yeah, that's probably what they said. No, the people, they were volunteers. I'm sure they didn't care. Yeah, it's been tried many different ways. But even using modern technology to do this, no one's found a way to do it yet.
How about what if the energy came from the outside and it was only the very inside layer that didn't get scorched? I don't like this theory, I'm just saying. What if we'd wrap somebody up in Nagasaki and yoink them again?
I don't think you get this. Dude, there were surely people sleeping on, beds when Nagasaki happened.
Yeah, I'm sure there was. That was just a fun story.
Alright guys, that's it for our discussion on the Shroud of Turin. You see the evidence, you see the people who don't believe that. What do you think? Was it actually the cloth that was wrapped around Jesus, or is it simply a hoax? Thanks so much for joining us for this episode. You can find the Nucky Guys podcast on YouTube, Amazon Music, and Spotify. And we love to read your comments. Please leave comments. Hit us with a 5-star review if you think we deserve it. And share with a friend.
Yeah, and if your comments are funny enough, we may read them on a podcast recording. Maybe.
Yes.
Possibly.
You might get them featured and reviewed by us.
And because we all got a little bit of that tism, we like to see the lines on our charts go up and down.
Rhythm with the tism, brother.
So hit that follow button, hit the subscribe button, whatever platform you're on.
Yes, we do appreciate that to keep our tisms happy. Anyway, that's all we got. So as always, be careful out there.